For those who have seen any biotech-related stories or headlines in Hong Kong in recent years, odds are you've seen that Hong Kong's biotech sector is booming. This is certainly true in one sense, as Hong Kong has become the world's second largest stock listing market for such companies. For actual biotech companies based in Hong Kong, however, adjectives like thriving and booming may not be the best descriptors of its larger ecosystem. Despite the increasing rise in local stock market listings, which is currently on track to triple in number this year compared to 2020, there is still only one Hong Kong-based biotech company listed on the Hong Kong Exchange. Before we dive into some of the reasons why this is the case and discuss how Hong Kong's biotech ecosystem could possibly be enhanced, I'd like to ask our panelists to introduce themselves. Dr. Leung, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Clark. Hello, my name is Shawn Leung. I'm the founder and CEO of SinoMab BioScience Limited. We develop antibodies as well as chemical drugs for the treatment of autoimmune diseases. We have several products actually in different phases of clinical trials in China as well as in the rest of the world. Then we have manufacturing capability, etc., and research center in Hong Kong. And we got listed in 2019 in the Hong Kong Stock Exchange under Chapter 18A. And so far, we are the only biotech company, Hong Kong-based, that got listed in Hong Kong.
Thank you, Dr. Leung. And Sabrina.
I'm Sabrina Chan, Senior Executive Director of the Hong Kong Association of Pharmaceutical Industry, representing 33 multinational R&D pharmaceutical companies in Hong Kong. We have our membership cover top 20 global companies, and at the same time, we discover 95% of medicines in Hong Kong.
And Stanley.
This is Danny. So I'm the CEO of Sanomics. Sanomics actually is a local Hong Kong biotech company. We're focusing on cancer diagnostic, and simple to say, we help the cancer patient to find the right drugs.
Thank you, Stanley. So let's dive into things. Dr. Leung, we'll start with you. While biotech may be somewhat new, relatively new on a lot of people's radars, Hong Kong has actually been talking about it for a couple of decades now. However, during that time, there's been a boom in mainland China in this sector, but maybe not so much in Hong Kong. That is evidenced by the listings on the Hong Kong Exchange. So could we begin by maybe describing some of the reasons why that's the case? Why has it thrived so much in mainland China and maybe not so much for Hong Kong-based companies?
I think the first thing we have to understand what is biotechnology. So different people will have different meaning in them. And I think Hong Kong is focused on the academic part of it, mainly on research. But biotech covers a whole range of vertically integrated capabilities, etc., as well as professional development path. And then Hong Kong's research capability is really, really good. And then they are focused more on the research-based part of it. But we don't have manufacturing. We don't have drug development capabilities. We don't have the regulations. We don't have the clinicians to do clinical trials, etc. So that whole ecosystem is not in Hong Kong yet. As versus to other parts of like China, we have the R&D capabilities. We have manufacturing capabilities. We have the regulatory agencies such as the China FDA, the NIMPA. And then we also have all these different hospitals who can do clinical trials, etc. So that a drug can do from research all the way down to product approval and marketing. So I think that kind of ecosystem is not available in Hong Kong, and then we're not focusing on that. And then we have to revisit the whole thing and how are we going to strategize, how we're going to develop biotech. The attraction is there, the market is there, the talent is urgently needed. And then Hong Kong has the potential to do it. And just how are we going to do it? We have to think clearly about what we're going to do next.
Right. And Stanley, from your perspective, I mean, you grew, coming from the science park, right? So I'd like to hear your perspective on that as well.
So first of all, I totally agree with what Dr. Leung just mentioned. But I think just want to summarize one of the key points that compared to like fintech or AI, for biotech, I think there's one very distinctive difference about we have a term from bench to bed. That means that, okay, you have a very great innovation. You have your own proprietary knowledge, but that no matter how good you are, the idea you have, you take a long time to prove that whether that's clinical useful or not. and what Dr. just mentioned, which we call the FDA or NIMPA. And I think that is something Hong Kong is missing for a long time because previously, what the registration system in Hong Kong is normally we really depend on two other countries in ICH. That means that okay, we can skip the from bench to back. That means okay, as long as there are two other countries, they prove it, they have done their bench to back, so we don't have to take time, and then we don't have to spend any resources on that. So that means that they create a dilemma or the research circle. That means that to me, just for me myself as example, I started my biotech degree in 2000 and 2005, but honestly, from that time to now, I cannot see any local industry they focusing from bench to back the translation. And okay, we have a lot of good patents, we have a lot of good scholars, but it seems that we skip this process, intermediate process from bench to back. So I think that one of the key points is that.
Thanks, Stanley. Now, Sabrina, as someone representing multinationals, you're always looking for reasons whether to or whether not to invest in Hong Kong and why. So when you look at the biotech landscape, are you seeing evidence that it's being promoted adequately in Hong Kong? Does it give you confidence, to invest in this landscape?
Yeah, before answer these questions, I would like to echo what Stanley mentioned.
Please.
Because I'm from biopharmaceutical sector, probably it is more product oriented. But at the same time, when we talk about how to change the landscape, there are two aspects we can look into. One is how could it benefit to patients in Hong Kong. Another is how to develop an ecosystem to make it an economic driver of Hong Kong. So with bench-to-back, actually we have a lot of experience to bring a product to Hong Kong. Registration, as Stanley and Shawn mentioned, it could be a barrier to CPP. Stanley mentioned, actually, if we're talking about the world trend, we already changed the landscape, even from WHO recommendation. We have to have a kind of reliance pathway. To explain a little bit is rely on some advanced countries' registration. So why two CPP now? Why not one CPP if you trust the regulatory authority of other countries? So this is number one barrier. And the second is from branch to back. Another thing is how to access to patients, how to ensure the innovative technology access to patients in Hong Kong. So in private market, we don't have any issue. But in public market, among the research of our member company, it takes 17 months to have a drug to be listed in hospital authority, for example. It takes quite a while for Hong Kong patients enjoy the advanced technology in Hong Kong. So this is some of the areas that from ban to batch, some of the barrier we come across. Another thing is how to build an ecosystem in order to ensure we multinational will invest in Hong Kong. Mm-hmm. So we always ask why invest in Hong Kong. One is what kind of competitive advantage of Hong Kong. Another is we have to compare Hong Kong to other countries. So in the recent policy address submission to the government, we explicitly talking about we need a dedicated industry-specific policy, an industry-specific administrative body, and also a coordinate person in charge of the project managers, in order to ensure a success of the wish. It is not a wish. We want it, to have a kind of implementation.
Thanks, and I just want to follow up with you as well. I mean, you're someone who writes recommendations to the Hong Kong government as ways to maybe enhance the Hong Kong biotech industry. Could you just share what a proposal like that may look like? What are some of the things you may be suggesting, and how might that compare to other jurisdictions in which you may be writing these types of proposals?
We gather some reference from other countries because we are multinational. We come across a lot of different systems and in the rest of the world. For example, we compare our competitor of Singapore or other Asian country. They are very dedicated to make biopharmaceutical sector as an economic driver. They have dedicated policy in the national level. And from Hong Kong, definitely where city level policy make it clear to the public. For example, if we talking about what kind of policy we promote biopharmaceutical sector, actually in a lot of different bureau, we can't see a very dedicated policy which in the public domain. What we can see an extensive proposal or more details probably in the Science Park website or a word in a sentence in Invest Hong Kong. So we have to look for the information. But from other countries, they well promote their policy. So actually it is a very different perspective. And another point is we need a dedicated branch or an authority to well coordinate all the factors in order to build the ecosystem. For example, is the infrastructure enough? Is the investment enough? A dedicated funding? How to build talent? A lot of different, this kind of issue have to put in focus and with relevant resources and structure to deal with it. For example, just like in UK, they introduce chief scientific officer to coordinate the science development of different departments. And from Hong Kong, for example, if we want to do a clinical trial, we have to get approval from Department of Health, the government. We have to have an ethics approval in hospital authority, but not one-off. If we want to do cluster clinical trial, in the past we have to apply to different clusters. And just recently, thank you for hospital authority, they have a centralized coordinate office just from this year. So we have to work fast to grab this opportunity with and not only improve ourselves, we have to do better than the others.
Thanks, Sabrina. And before we move on, I just want to remind our audience that we actually encourage you to submit questions to the panel. You can do so by using the Q&A function in the webinar platform. Please do so. We will reserve some time at the end for your questions. Now, Dr. Leung, I mean, there is some investment from the Hong Kong government to the biotech space. I mean, that's unmistakable. There is some. This seems to mostly be more toward academia, more toward university settings, however, which is certainly important, and Hong Kong has a lot of strengths in the research and development space. But is that good enough? Why or why not? And maybe if you could describe, you already did a little bit talking about manufacturing. What is the biotech life cycle? I mean, research and development happens, but then what? And where is that? I imagine that's not what's happening, that next part of the life cycle in Hong Kong.
Well, actually, I have to have certain continuation with Sabrina's
yes,
response
please, yes.
The biotechnology actually starts from small research groups. And then Sabrina is more on the patients and representing MNC. And we look at the number of listed companies in Hong Kong, about 36 of them. About 30 of them working on biologics, or other chemical drugs for the treatment of cancer, autoimmune diseases. And there's one vaccine company. And then you have 2 companies that are listed out of that 30 that are diagnostic, and then the rest of them, medical devices. None of them has anything to do with MNC. Okay, so MNC is only interested in investing. For example, Lilly invested in Nuvent. So, but they are not the main driver of the biotech industry themselves. Biotech starts from small companies with scientists, with risky ideas. And then you have VC, LP, and now we have the exit strategy with the listing in Hong Kong, so that they can get the money they need for the development of the product.
Right.
So I think that this decision of what biotech is extremely important. So if you have consultants saying that this is the area that we wanted to develop into as a biotech, for example, we do more research, we do more diagnostics, then you're limiting the potential of biotechnology. And I started like consulting the government when I was asked back to Hong Kong to head the Hong Kong Institute of Biotechnology about in 2000. I visited all these cities in China, and Hong Kong was way ahead of that in China, and in terms of the science and all these capabilities. But they create a permissible environment for different scientists to come up with ideas to allow them to get the product from research all the way down to the patients. Of course, they got into bumpy ride, they got mistakes, they corrected it. And then the government is actively changing the policy. For example, in the past, if you want to file IND, investigational new drug, that means the approval for you to get your product into patients, into human trials. And it takes about 30 months to get it from application to approval. And then they're moving more towards the globalization of or harmonization of this IND application. It takes about 2 months or 3 months once you submit an application. Very similar to what we're having in the US. So I think that the government's role or the industry at large should allow them to create a permissible environment without identifying what exactly is biotechnology, so that people with ideas can come and develop and eventually thrive and take advantage of the listing opportunities in Hong Kong so that they can get funding.
Right.
So I think that is my idea of biotechnology.
Right. Yeah. Stanley, your thoughts on that?
I would say that one of the key points is, I'll echo both Sabrina and Dr. Leung. One of the key points is that we do not have a lot of necessary infrastructure in Hong Kong. Although, for example, for some practice, what just Dr. Leung mentioned, okay, we start from small group as a biotech. Actually, we do have in Hong Kong, for example, CHK Hong Kong, we have a very good scholar to invent the vaccine, the biologic, the small molecular drugs. But they have a very great idea. Also, they have patent. But the key point is that it seems that we do not have any POC, proof of concept infrastructure in Hong Kong. But I think that there's a very there's a very complicated problem, because if you really need some very good in shape infrastructure, I think the first thing is that you have a land space. Yeah. For example, we call it GMP factory, or currently we call it GMP PEX factory, right? But unfortunately, it seems that previously we do in Hong Kong, just according to my understanding, for those GMP we just have already 30 something, but none of them has already been elevated to GMP PEX standard. That means that it's still to have far away gap between the local standard and the international standard. So which means that even you have a very great idea, it seems that it's very hard to get practical in Hong Kong. So the only way is that you either to find China manufacturer, or you have to find in Singapore or US to get your POC, or we call the OEM. But that's okay, I think, because for OEM and what just Sabrina and Dr. mentioned, that actually we have a lot faster way to get the IRB or to get approval, like from 30-something months to 2 months, from 8 cluster to 1 cluster. Yeah, I think already policy have a good shape to help. I think we have a work gradually to have a good ecosystem. But to me, I think for we a good biotech company, okay, let's say we're focusing on the medicine, and especially for biologic, I think unfortunately in Hong Kong, I still cannot see a very good manufacturer or the manufacturing facility that can help the scholar or the professor to get the concept in POC. Yeah.
So yeah, go ahead, Sabrina.
Yeah, I want to add on what Stanley mentioned, because Hong Kong manufacturing is already PICS, a very high standard. But I think we have some strategic resources, but do we use it well, leverage it to develop the biotech or pharmaceutical sector in Hong Kong? I think this is number one. For example, we have one of the best database in the world with 90% of inpatient medical record in HA have it well used these strategic resources, for example. And I do believe we have some good resources, but whether we can access to it with business facilitation concept during the decision-making process, I think this is one thing. we have something need the government to have more support, not regarding the money or other things, is the concept itself and the regulatory support. And another thing is talking about our law and regulations. We have, just like Stanley and Shawn mentioned about the CPP things, this is a kind of regulatory support the government could have, could be of help, is to review the entire regulatory regime, whether it is cope with our objective, which is if we want to build Hong Kong as a biomedical hub in Hong Kong. So this is something I do believe is important, urgent and important to do, because even though Shawn mentioned that we may not be the driver, but we are the key investor. So if we make a decision why invest in Hong Kong, it is at that moment. So now is the time we make a decision. So is it now with this specific time we have such an ambition, can we attract enough investment in Hong Kong? So this is something I would like to add on what Stanley mentioned.
Sure. Well, you mentioned the database that Hong Kong has, largely owned by the hospital authority. So I'm curious where you see that. Hong Kong is certainly viewed as a hub for data analytics, having the ability to do things of that nature, informatics. Dr. Leung, what's your view on how that impacts the biotech ecosystem and landscape?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. Actually, I'm a director of the Hong Kong Genome Institute. Okay, and I think this is very important. It is part of the whole continuum of biotechnology, but it's not the whole thing about biotech. So I think that we refer back to the original question. We're focusing on academic research. We're focusing on specific areas. But biotech is a long integrated, vertically integrated functionalities that we need to have everything put in place. Now, about the infrastructure in Hong Kong, and I refer back to the ecosystem. And after the last 10 years, the whole world has changed a lot. For example, manufacturing. And it's allowed that nowadays that you actually can contract your manufacturing with some CDMO. And then you have a lot of CDMO in China, if you don't like to do it in China, Singapore, or in the US. So you certainly can do something like this. And I have invested in companies in Boston. Boston is obviously a biotech hub, right? They start off with about a few scientists. Now they have about 20 people. And the project is about to get into patients already. But how can that be done? They make antibodies because there are so many different companies. They will do antibodies for you, just for that purpose, CROs. And then they can humanize it for you. And then once you got the antibodies, as long as you have the capability to identify which one is good, which one is bad, then you can ask CDMO to do it for you. You can file an IND if you want in China, or if you want, you can do it in the US. And then you can hire clinicians to do it, phase 1 clinical trials for you. Then you have to design your business model, whether you want to go it alone all the way to the end of the whole phase 3 trial, or you can talk to MNC because you have proof of concept. The MNC can invest. So we cannot miss any single part of the whole thing that we discussed, but we cannot just focus on one or two areas. And the ecosystem nowadays, actually, you can do it. It's just like, as I mentioned before, you need to provide a permissible environment so that people will do it. And this has to be consistent. You can't change it to one direction on one day and then move it back to another direction on the other day, because then people don't know what to do with it. And they wouldn't be moving here to Hong Kong to start the risky business.
Right.
So that's my opinion.
Yeah. And Stanley, I think both toward the data analytics, I'd like to hear your view on that, but also I'd like to shift toward a look at the GBA as well. We keep talking about manufacturing, how ways in which that could be connected. Are there any opportunities that you see eventually, if borders can be, stripped away a little bit, whatever might be possible in that realm? Are there opportunities in that case for collaboration with parts of the GBA when it comes to extending that ecosystem?
So I think definitely GBA would be a good chance for Hong Kong biotech development. First of all, I think I echo again, regarding capital, we have already 18 Japan in Hong Kong, so there is no any concern or worry about that we cannot get the capital. Regarding R&D capability, again, we have CHK, we have Hong Kong U, we have a lot of good scholars there, and we have the most patent ever in the world every year related to healthcare or biotech. I think, but one of the key points is missing about the infrastructure and the experience from bench to bed. Yeah. Before I want to elaborate, I also want to give one more interesting example. A lot of people may think about, okay, if for example, a very interesting place or the biotech we call the India, right? Maybe a lot of people will be a bit hesitate about the drug developed by India, but the key point is that the understanding and knowledge in India about the manufacturing is really good. You can see that, for example, for COVAX, the WHO, the COVAX vaccine scheme, actually most of the vaccine they create and manufactured by India. And you can see that a lot of MNC company, they do have heavily invest their facility there. So that create a very good ecosystem for India people talent to build and understand about the manufacturing. Because I would say that for biologic or small molecule drug manufacturing is really an art. You have to take time and you have to take a lot of experience. I think it's quite similar to Japan, right? Japan, they have a lot of good CDMO and CMO. I think but I think none of them would say that Japan have good R&D capability in medicine, right? Except the PD1, right? But I think you can see that they have a really good, great facility and infrastructure in Japan. So I think if we got the same methodology and analogy, so we are in Hong Kong, we can become a head and the brain on the R&D center in the whole GBA. But for POC, infrastructure, translation medicine process, we can outsource to GBA because they have a lot of space, especially land, and they have already good like CMO and CDMO there. So I think that would be a good collaboration. And I still, for the other thing is about biocompetition, right? Again, I think this is a very complicated topic about the data because I can use example, for example, genome project. Just for Dr. is a genome project director. Yeah. So I think at this moment we cannot see any company or any country or any government they can have full spectrum of genome about the whole different country or area of the people, right? But Hong Kong and GBA is very interesting because stands for the one country, two system, right? In Hong Kong, actually, we can not just collect the data from Hong Kong people, but at the same time, every year we have a lot of patients come outside Hong Kong, for example, from South Asia, of course from China, and for example, even like from Australia, Middle East. So we can collect a lot of different data from outside China. But the key point is that we cannot collect the data from China. So we got a GBA for the city in GBA like Shenzhen, Guangzhou, Zhongshan. I think you can see that the complement, right? They cannot collect the data outside China, but they have the right to collect the data in China. So one of the special places about the GBA we call the Hetao. There's an area land between Shenzhen and Hong Kong. So we think that would be a breakthrough point about the next milestone of biotech development both in GBA, in Hong Kong and GBA city. Because by there, possibly, ideally, that we can combine, that we have a place to combine the database. And that's a very unique. You cannot see any place in the world they can have the same situation, even like Singapore, right? Singapore is I think quite similar to Hong Kong, but they never have a chance to collect the data in China. So for China, at the same time, like Suzhou, Shanghai, right? They have a lot of good biotech company, but they cannot collect and they get the data from outside China. So one of the breakthrough point and the learning place for the breakthrough or the very serious advancement, I think I do look learning for the Hetao development in the coming future.
Right, that would be quite something. And Sabrina, what would that mean, for what you do?
It's actually, I have to echo to Stanley. It is a great opportunity for Hong Kong. I just want to add on the R&D part that Hong Kong, among a lot of research, we have one of the best investigator in the world. We are very renowned on investigator. At the same time, the problem of Hong Kong is the patient pool, because we are small in population, so the patient pool is quite limited. So with the investigator in Hong Kong and also the patient pool in China, or GBA even, we definitely have some synergy if we try to do an R&D network among Greater Bay. And it will be really something we are looking forward to. The second, when we talk about the database, among our industry, we're talking about precision medicine, which is personalized medicine to a specific group of patients. We classify patients in some groups with reference to their genomic data and also some medical record and even some data about lifestyle. So after we classify it, we are more, the use of drug or treatment will be more effective, very target to that specific patients. And database actually is one of the most important reference, or we call it even a kind of data-driven treatment for the time being. So we do think Hong Kong has a great potential to be a center of excellence in precision medicine if we can take this opportunity with the most important resources, which is the database we have right now in Hong Kong.
Right. And Dr. Leung, your thoughts on opportunities that could be had with the GBA?
Well, GBA actually is a great opportunity. I think it goes beyond just database. And then, of course, you have a lot of collaboration, tap into clinical resources in China, tap into manufacturing capabilities in China, and then you have talent actually available so that you can take advantage of. Because like everyone is trying to get talents, and then we have a hard time getting the right talent, and not just on research. I think the most difficult part is on manufacturing talents, as well as on the clinical research talents. So these are things that actually, even that you are located in Hong Kong, you still would hire because they'll be moving around everywhere. So it doesn't really matter whether it is in Hong Kong, in China, or in Boston. So the GBA itself, because it has certain information sharing possibility. So I think that's a great thing because, like, for example, if we want to do clinical trials in China, because we are considered a foreign company or with foreign connections, so they have to review our IRB or investigate what the IRB is like.
IEC.
The approval from the
Clinical
hospital,
trial.
the ethics committee,
Yeah.
approval. So they have to look to make sure that genetic information would not be leaked out. And then they have to examine for 3 months. So you have to wait 3 months for that. In GB, I think that will be waived. And then we'll speed up the clinical trials process dramatically. So I think that is a great opportunity for Hong Kong and the GB area, yes.
Thanks, Dr. Leung. I just wanted to again make our audience aware that we encourage you to submit questions to the panel. I have a couple more questions for them before we get to your questions, but I did just want to throw that reminder out as well. Stanley, I'll go to you next. Dr. Leung just brought up talent. This is certainly something I wanted to ask you guys about as well. Again, we've already mentioned Hong Kong is the second largest ecosystem for fundraising, but that fundraising doesn't really go to the Hong Kong biotech ecosystem itself for the most part, and in particular around talent. What is the talent ecosystem? If people go to university here, maybe they have a great experience on the research and development side, but is there somewhere for them to go? Are there companies for them to work for? Or are they leaving Hong Kong? What is the current talent landscape for Hong Kong biotech?
I would say that this situation will be a transitional stage. Yeah, because first of all, we have to admit, regarding the biotech or lifestyle manufacturing process, I think in Hong Kong we are a bit late, quite late. Yeah. For example, I would say the same example. Okay, regarding 20 years before. Okay, I don't think anyone would say that the biotech development in China would be better and greater than Hong Kong. But at this moment, we have to admit this. But the key point is that actually they start their healthcare or life biotech is even a bit late than Hong Kong. But one of the things that, because I think we can see a lot of company and we call the financial investor, they really can see the chance and opportunity in China. So they heavily invest. First of all, the first thing, they have the capital. Then they heavily invest the facility. Okay, with the facility, so that your talent will have a place to work. Without the facility, no matter how good or how good or how innovative talent you are, there's no way that you can try to perform or try to make your idea become practical, right? So one of the things we have to admit, we do not have any scenario or platform for people the talent in Hong Kong to execute their idea. But of course, I think most of the people in the sector, for example, government, Science Park, company, or even like university, they can see that. So recently I can say they've really heavily invest on the fundamental facility, as I mentioned, animal health study, GCP lab, QC lab. So first of all, so that means we create a platform that, and the second day we can encourage the people to get more understanding or study. For example, in CHK, they will create a master that to how to teach the people how to do the clinical work. For Hong Kong U, they have some stem cell or cell therapy course that to ask those people to know how to build the cell therapy or biologic in a GMP pigs. Right? And actually, for some pharmaceutical born in Hong Kong, they do a lot of advancement changes. For example, last year, they really passed a lot about the advanced therapy, which means they allow the people in Hong Kong, they really build their cell therapy lab. And there's a really, really breakthrough. What I mentioned, because why I would say there's breakthrough, just give another example. Recently, we have heard a treatment called CAR-T therapy. That is a very powerful treatment for the lymphoma patient. Actually, by this idea, we start from the FDA approval maybe around 3 to 4 years before. By that time, a lot of people were longing for that, Hong Kong will be the second one after the US and the Europe. That become a one center that can execute the drug. But unfortunately, you can see that now, even in China, they have the first patient to use the CAR-T. But at this moment, the sad point in Hong Kong is that, okay, we can ask the DH that pass that drug, but we do not have any facility to execute the drug. Because for CAR-T, there's not just a pills, not just a biologic, not just a vaccine. There's a very complicated process. So looking at this point, again, we have a good talent. Actually, a lot of people, a lot of scholars in Hong Kong, they know CAR-T and they know biologic, but they do not have a platform to execute. So platform means the physical facility plus the law. But I can see that, okay, the government and a lot of different centers, they try their best to create a great platform. I won't say ecosystem, I would say to create the platform first. Platform, then people, then case, then the industry chain, that is the whole ecosystem. But I would say that although we are a bit late, in Hong Kong, but still we can see we create a lot of effort to put it forward. And I think all the biotech people telling in Hong Kong, they know that, okay, we're still very passionate to have the Hong Kong to be to become an excellent center of biotech development. So maybe I think it takes 4 to 5 years, then Hong Kong will become an elite in the Greater Bay Area to develop those kind of drug and the biotech.
Okay, that's optimistic look.
Yeah.
That's good to hear. Sabrina, what are your thoughts on the talent landscape?
Talent is mobility. People have some sort of mobility. So it is chicken and egg. Do we have an ecosystem to keep those people in place? And without those people in place, how can we develop such an ecosystem? So it is chicken and egg. And other than
so which comes first then?
Yeah. So actually, talking about people, we can build people. Just like in university or somewhere, we build people. But when we talk about develop people talents locally, whether the existing flexibility in university or the support from university is enough or not, probably Stanley already mentioned some. But also sometimes nowadays it seems a lot of dynamic in the business world. So whether we need some people knowing other than some core knowledge they have, they should know some other knowledge in order to facilitate what they are doing. This is something happen actually in the rest of the world. They have some dual degree or expose some professional into, for example, some business environment. So a kind of industry and academic collaborations is happening in the rest of the world. And another thing is how to attract talent. as mentioned, talents move around the world. How to facilitate them to settle in Hong Kong, to support Hong Kong, or that's something we have to think more probably. But just when Stanley mentioned about CAR-T, CAR-T, the manufacturer of CAR-T actually is one of my members. And they have a manufacturing site in Shanghai, in somewhere else, but not in Hong Kong. CAR-T actually is, the manufacturing have to go with the lab together. So whether the Hong Kong government really actively reach out talking about they would like to have such a facility in Hong Kong, or just a passive facilitator, if you come, okay, good, we will, we welcome. So I think sometimes how aggressive we want those ecosystem to be in place, and how do the government support it from the policy level and coordinate relevant stakeholder to build the ecosystem. I think probably we should have more thought to it.
Right. Yeah. And Dr. Leung, your thoughts?
Oh, to attract talent. That's an interesting question. And then let's say in a biotech startup, so how can you attract talents? You have an idea. You tell them the future of the company, a chance of your company getting bought out or getting listed. You give stock options. You give stocks, and then talent will come. So it's a matter of like whether you have the thriving biotech, small biotech companies that are willing to base the operation in Hong Kong. Because as I said before, I don't think there is a geographical limitations about where you set up your company nowadays, because the ecosystem is so permissible that if you want to do the manufacturing here, it's okay. But these are things that are not done by the industry. Actually, in China, how did they get to that point that we're getting now? Because the government has a lot of investment, and they drive the whole biotech directions, so that eventually things will build up, people will come, and then eventually you have all those like talents coming as well. And again, we cannot rely too much on academic training, because in university, there's no courses on regulations. There is no courses on quality control, no courses in bioprocessing, and no courses in doing clinical trials, etc. So those are industry-based training. And then we have people actually, they got the experience, they're Hong Kong people, trained in the US, returned back to China. And I want to headhunt them as well. But it's difficult. But the talents are there, but they're not trained by university. They're trained maybe by MNC, eventually to come out for better opportunities. So you have to give them opportunity to give them the chance to get their ideas to reality. So they will come.
So in the chicken and egg scenario, it sounds like the first one, in your opinion, is presenting the opportunity.
Correct.
Yeah. Great. So Stanley, I wanted to go to you. One of the issues as well with biotech in Hong Kong is that Hong Kong does not have its own like regulation system when it comes to that. Could you describe why that's such a big deal?
Wow, it's a very big topic. Yeah. So first of all, okay, I would just give some example. For example, I think a lot of people, we heard FDA very frequently. And for example, recently the vaccine, right? We always ask for FDA when that you approve. No matter Moderna, BioScience, they're waiting for approval. And once they approve, okay, so then with that, the key point is that they can grant the confidence to the population. That's already good enough to use. So regarding the biotech, before like 18 chapter, why a lot of people, they are unwilling to invest in biotech, because there's a long way to wait for that approval. Because normally for drugs, it takes from, for example, from we call the phase 0 or the IND or animal study to the phase 3 approval. It takes around at least maybe 8 to 10 years. And for average, more than like 15 years. So you can see that there's become the gold standard for a medical company that, okay, whether I would like to invest or not, okay, I would like to see whether you have a chance or a likelihood that you can get the phase 3 approval. That means that when I can get better money, because before the phase 3 approval, there's no way you can earn any money because you cannot get practical. I mean, you cannot get your product in the market. That's illegal, right? Okay, so that for after a long time, a lot of investment company, they will do launching for that, okay? But recently, luckily, we have 18 chapter. We call the pre-revenue, pre-profit IPO listing route. That means that they give a chance that, okay, for those biotech company, okay, I think regarding the EX of the government, okay, it take a long time. So, okay, we give you a chance that even without the approval, we give you the money, right? Okay, but the key point is that ultimately, because no matter, okay, I would say that for the 18 is kind of we call the seed fund or we call the VC, but that IPO version of VC. But ultimately, if you want to get a good performance of price or IPO performance, you have to really find out that when your product can go live into the market. Because without approval, still, you're just a dream, just a PPT, just an idea, right? So that means that no matter how great the 18 chapter is, ultimately, all the investors, no matter the public investor or institutional investor, they have to focusing on the approval process. That's the key point because no approval, no return, no money back. Right? So, but the point is that in Hong Kong, even now, actually a lot of people, I think Sabrina will echo me again. Okay? Actually, for like last 30 or 50 years, actually, the only way we can approve the drug is that we really depend on other advanced countries. The situation is quite similar to patent registration. For example, in patent registration, like before the last year, actually, we do not have our own system to register a patent, which means that no matter you have a great idea, right? There is no department or a government agency in here that can help you to register your patent. What you have to do, you have a great idea. The first thing you have to do, you have to find outside Hong Kong country to find they have their patent system. You register there first. And then when they grant the approval, you come back to Hong Kong to record the second layer approval, right? Similar in Hong Kong, similar to medicine, right? Or Dubai, the same. If you want to get approval in Hong Kong, okay, first of all, you have to make your product to get to outside Hong Kong country to get approval. We call it CCP, what just Sabrina mentioned. So the point is here, okay, for example, just imagine if you're an investor, right? You already know that approval is really important, but the key point is that you do not have any approval process in Hong Kong. So that is that no matter how heavily invested here, for the patent, for the facility. Ultimately, you still have to find outside OEM partner like CDMO or OEM or GMP partner to make the process again, to get the approval again. So that's why that will seriously impact the investor. That why, okay, I do appreciate your idea. For example, what Dr. Leung mentioned. Okay, we have a great idea, right? But the point is that, okay, I know your idea, so maybe I just invest for your patent registration or proprietary knowledge, intangible assets, intangible knowledge, intangible asset development. But ultimately, for the most heavy investment, the manufacturing, the CDMO, the approval, all the investors, they will not risk in Hong Kong because there's no way to get the approval. No matter how heavy invest here, right? So they will just invest in outside there. So back to the point. So that means that without the registration system, investor will not put the money in here, and no money and no platform and no talent and no product. So there's a whole chain of problems there. But I know from Sabrina, okay, Hong Kong government is going to change. So that maybe in coming soon that we will have a very clear-cut registration system, which means that we do not have to really heavily depend on other countries. We can have our own process and own way to judge whether the drug is okay, approved, and can go to the market. Yeah.
No, I have to declare.
Yeah.
No, I don't have that information.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry for that.
Sorry.
You heard from other people.
Yeah.
But what I would like, as Stanley mentioned, I really want to echo about it as well, because the delayed registration, it loses the business opportunity. That's very clear, right?
Right.
And another thing is, this is why we are talking about some review of the regulations, is just talking about manufacturing. Because for Hong Kong, if in manufacturing requirement, you need an AP, authorized person, to do product release, to take the responsibility of the product safety, quality, everything. And one of the criteria is need one experience of Hong Kong GMP manufacturing experience. So in Hong Kong, if we don't have, for example, we don't have experience in doing CAR T, if we don't have experience to manufacture some advanced therapy product, so who approved the person to come to Hong Kong to in charge of product release? This is very basic, right? And probably if we ask the government, they will give a special permission. I don't know, but at least if we, when we do an investment, we have to be very clear about law and regulations in order to ensure what kind of risks we have as well. But on paper, black and white, the law is there. So this is why the delayed registration and some of the, it is only an example, talking about the authorized person, the qualification of authorized person. So this is why something we have to do in a holistic way to take another aspect to review our administrative procedure, our law and regulations in order to ensure it is business facilitation factor to be considered and put in this kind of organization structure, law, regulations, every part of it.
Thanks, Sabrina. So we're starting to run out of time, so I just want to throw one final question to each of you. And it's more of a prompt, more than a question. So Dr. Leung, I'll start with you. If you could give one primary recommendation to the government, a practical recommendation as to what they can do to help enhance and grow Hong Kong's biotech landscape, what would it be? But also, then why would they do that? What would be the reason for them to go forward with this recommendation? How would it help Hong Kong as a whole?
Well, I think it goes back to the basic question: what is biotechnology? And then they have to clearly understand or decide what biotech area we want ourselves to be into. And then I think that to get that kind of advisors, I think that they have to find the right consultant and right advisors who understand the industry and give the proper advices. Because we've been talking about this for 2 decades already, and then we're not getting anywhere. And then you look at other parts of the world, people are moving already. So there must be something missing. And then that, to me, is like the definition of biotechnology, and then the proper advice.
So how do they find that out? How do they determine? What do they need to do to make that determination?
I think it's all dependent on the government itself. I think the government is spending too much time in academic consultant, because we can get research excellence, I think, comparable to other parts of the world. But that's not the whole story about biotechnology. And you look at Chapter 18A, one of the requirements is that you have a product that passed phase 1 clinical trial. That's the requirement to get on Chapter 18A. We don't even have any product getting into phase 1 clinical trials. How can we get to that part? And how can we take advantage of Chapter 18A in Hong Kong?
Thanks, Dr. Leung. Stanley.
So I think, again, echo to myself, I think the backbone of biotech, of course I totally understand what Dr. Leung just mentioned, but another thing is about the registration system. Again, I think the origin of biotech is about registration. The reason is that, okay, the ultimate product of biotech, we have to apply, I would say the clinical biotech, ultimately we have to apply on human. And there's a quite risky thing to apply a new compound or new product on a human for clinical use, for example, cancer, Alzheimer, right? So that in order to get the market and the population confident, we have to make sure that we have a very good and perfect and complete registration system. If not, there's no one trusts your product at all. And no one trusts, no one use. No one use, there's no return. No return, that means no investment. And how to do that? I don't, first of all, how, okay. I don't think for the Hong Kong government, they have to rebuild a new system, because if we take time and time consume, and we don't have any good talent to review the product. Even we don't know, what Sabrina mentioned, we no one to do the CAR T. How can we review the CAR T, right? So the next step I would propose that, okay, either we can choose the existing center. For example, we can get connect with FDA, EMA or LIMPA. We can choose either one. I think that's much easier to Hong Kong government to make it faster, because there's no way to rebuild another one because no talent and no experience, right? And I assume that after maybe get adopted to either FDA, EMA or EMA or LIMPA or Japan system. Okay, I think even like Australia system, I think take maybe 10 or 20 years, we can fine tune and optimize system to fit in Hong Kong. But I strongly recommend that we can have to take the first step. We have to take the first move as soon as possible. If not, I think we will get late. So that's my comment.
Thanks, Stanley and Sabrina.
Yeah. I do think sector-specific policy with structure support is very important, because why we have registration problem, why we have talent problem, why we have, we discuss a lot of issues now, but at the same time, do we have a sector-specific policy to help us to solve all the problem? Do we have a coordinator within the government to help us to consolidate this kind of issue with some solutions? So this is something I do think is very important. Well define the issue, sector-specific policy with structure support to coordinate and consolidate every issues and stakeholders' views as well.
Thanks, Sabrina. So unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for the panel. Thank you guys so much for sharing your time and thoughts with us. We very much appreciate it. To our audience, this segment is not over. However, recently, our Chief of Staff at the SCMP, Joey Liu, recently sat down with Danny Yeung, the CEO and co-founder of Prenetics Group, to talk about how Prenetics has been a leader in the fight against COVID-19 and what they have in store for the future. There's a little bit of breaking news that is discussed as well. So enjoy that interview. Thank you.
Welcome to this SCMP Fireside Chat. My name is Joey and I am the Chief of Staff at the South China Morning Post. Today I am delighted to be joined by the one and only Mr. Danny Yeung. Danny is a leading serial entrepreneur and investor, and of course he is the co-founder and CEO of Prenetics as well as Circle DNA, two companies that are now of course household names here in Hong Kong and increasingly globally. And of course, your list of accomplishments and accolades just go on. So super excited to have you and welcome to the studio.
Thank you so much, Joey, for having me today.
Yeah, I mean, to kick off, we need to talk about the huge news that's been announced this morning, something that will essentially reshape the entire biotech landscape in Hong Kong and the entire startup ecosystem. So tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, so it's been a crazy journey, right? So earlier this morning, while we officially announced that Prenetics and Adrian Chang's Artisan Acquisition Corp will basically merge together and be a listed company. So certainly this is certainly a milestone for not just us, but I think for all of Hong Kong, right? So certainly I think with this IPO announcement, we are actually set to be the first unicorn to ever exit. So certainly very, very thankful for Adrian and his support from day one. And so certainly we definitely look to reinvent and continue to make an impact here in Hong Kong in a global aspect. So certainly I think this transaction values the company at a 1.25 billion enterprise value. We have roughly 400 mil USD in cash that's going into the company, and certainly we look to make significant impact with that in terms of expanding our R&D capabilities, growing our geographies, expanding throughout US, Southeast Asia, and certainly the rest of the world.
That is incredible news, and I want to give you a huge congratulations, but this is only, of course, the beginning, and we're going to expect amazing and great things to happen. So then I guess to kick things off, I do want to focus on Prenetics and the incredible journey the company has been through from its origins as a biotech startup focused on genetic testing, and then of course more recently being the go-to destination for COVID-19 testing. Like, tell us more about this incredible journey that the company's been on.
Yeah, so I mean, we founded Prenetics back in 2014, right? So the name Prenetics actually comes from prevention and genetics. So at that time of my life, I really wanted to create impact. I couldn't find any other industry as impactful as healthcare. So we started out as a genetic testing company. Of course, we launched Circle DNA in late 2019, in which now we've already sold over 130,000 test kits globally. So of course, last year when the pandemic hit back in March, we felt we actually needed to do something from a corporate responsibility element, given that we had the resources, we had the laboratory, we had the scientific and medical team. And so we actually started just doing we just started doing at-home PCR testing last April. And on a daily basis, we were actually selling out 100, 200 kits on a daily basis, because I'm sure you remember that time was actually very difficult to get a COVID test.
Yeah.
It was either very expensive, 3,000 to 4,000 HKD,
Yeah.
and you needed to go to a private hospital. But at that time, if you wanted to get tested, the last thing you wanted to do was leave your home, correct? So we actually created at that time we created the infrastructure so that we send a kit to you, and then you mail it back to our laboratory and you get results within 12 to 24 hours. And of course, in May, in the UK, we ended up working with the English Premier League.
Yeah.
And that's something I think we're incredibly proud that a Hong Kong headquartered company is actually working in the UK, testing all 20 clubs, players and media and coaches on a weekly basis, which today we still do that for them, right? And then certainly last July, then we began working with the Hong Kong government. So we were the first private laboratory in Hong Kong to be appointed to do mass community testing. At that time, again, it was certainly lots of new things for us. It was quite scary initially, because one of our first assignments was to test all the restaurant staff in Wong Tai Sin. And this was last July, and this was at the height of the pandemic, where it was actually quite scary. So I and my rest of my senior management, we actually went out to Wong Tai Sin ourselves and passed out kits to the restaurant staff. Certainly it was a bit scary, but certainly I knew that if I was going to tell my team to do it, I needed to set an example. And I did that for basically 2-3 days, 8 hours a day, sweaty, hot, but certainly we felt that we're making a big impact, because we saw the smiles on the faces of restaurant staff. They felt very relieved that the government and us were going door to door to pass out the kits. And now in summary, in the last 14 months, we've now processed more than 5 million PCR laboratory tests globally. So certainly I think this is something that our entire team is very, very proud of.
Yeah, it's incredible just the impact that you and the team have created, how quickly you were able to essentially mobilize. And that's something I wanted to dig into. When COVID struck, of course, no one was prepared,
Correct.
no one was expecting. But actually, I do remember Prenetics was, very swift in its response and being able to pivot. So I guess I wanted to, better understand from, your perspective, what were some of the things that were going through you and the company's head? What were the considerations? How were you able to essentially, pivot and focus and, just mobilize everything, so quickly? Yeah,
so certainly I think it all starts, and even when I tell younger entrepreneurs and et cetera, in terms of building the company, you have to have a very strong team. Right? Because if I didn't have a strong team behind me, if I want to do, hey, let's do this, let's not sleep, let's not do anything, people are not going to listen to me, right? But by default, I think we had a really strong infrastructure, a really strong team that was very passionate. Every single member of our management team, they're very passionate about helping the community and doing something of impact. So I think when that hit, then certainly, of course, we gathered as a group, as a team, say, hey, is this something that we want to do? And if it is something that we want to do, we knew that we had to make certain sacrifices in terms of family, friends, time, and always being on. And certainly a lot of times, it was difficult, right? Lots of, there was literally no sleep during some of the days, because I'm sure you've seen when we do lockdowns, we have to start testing people at 7 p.m. and then basically get and we're there in the buildings until 2 a.m. And then we actually have to get results out until 7 a.m. So you can see everything's very, very sensitive in time. And then basically we still have to work the next day. Correct, and because it's continuing to pile on, right?
Yeah.
And then so at the height, we were doing about 30,000 tests on a daily basis here alone in Hong Kong.
Wow.
And then certainly our UK business also did a lot in the local communities, working with private sector.
Yeah. And it's incredible to hear, because the kits are, of course, here in Hong Kong, but also internationally, some regions, whether it's in airports or, like you mentioned, being able to test the English Premier League, the players themselves, to help them get their season back on track. All this is just incredible. And I know very recently you guys have just launched a new product, which is the Circle Health Pod. And this is something that's very, very interesting and of great benefit to the Hong Kong community. So I was just wondering, what were the, thought processes behind that to launch this product, and tell us more about the Circle Health.
Yeah, so certainly, I think for me as an entrepreneur, right? So I think the key thing is, we always have to continue to innovate. We can't rest on what works yesterday or last month. So I'm always looking at what else can we do more. And then so even last year when we were actually doing a lot of the PCR laboratory testing, I felt that while that's the gold standard testing, it would be really amazing if you can do testing at point of care and that's at home. Right, so this is where we actually collaborated with University of Oxford, and we came in contact with their professors, their team. So we actually acquired the Oxford University spin-out company. At that time was a big risk, right? Because this is last summer, and no one knew how long COVID would last for. Correct. So we actually made a big bet at that time.
Yeah.
We actually used 30 million pounds to acquire the technology. So, but we knew that technology was very, very game changing, but we also knew it wasn't readily, that technology by itself won't be able to be made into the mass market, right? So in the last 12 months, we've actually been further investing in the R&D to create that technology, which is the rapid reagents from Oxford, into basically a miniature device. So basically, if you look at this device, so it's a rapid detection system for all infectious diseases that you can do at point of care and at home. So the way it works is, you see it's powered by a USB-C on the back, so there's power. And then so this is a reusable device. So it actually has biosensors, an amplification heater inside. And then so basically then you actually have a capsule. So this capsule is a single-use capsule. And then so you actually see a swab here. So I did the swab earlier. I leave my swab in here after a nasal swab. And then basically on the bottom, you have molecular reagents. So the swab buffer solution travels through the microfluid chamber. And then basically, if you touch the bottom of this a little bit, right? So it's a little bit hot, right?
Yeah.
So it's actually at 65 degrees, and then basically it's amplifying any potential virus. And then so basically I do a nasal swab, put it in here, and then basically in 20 minutes, I'll be able to get molecular nucleic acid amplification results.
Wow.
And the key thing why this is very important is that right now, of course, we have the PCR laboratory test, right? That takes anywhere from 4 to 24 hours. I have to go somewhere.
Right.
So this is PCR quality results, but in approximately 20 minutes.
Wow.
And the other type of rapid tests available today is typically antigen. And antigen, we also utilize those, but those are very accurate only of the symptoms. The challenge now with especially the Delta variant, a majority of cases are asymptomatic.
Right.
So you still need a molecular test.
Right.
So this is a molecular test that can detect at 96 sensitivity for both asymptomatic and symptomatic individuals.
Wow.
And again, the reason why we're so excited about this is because then this becomes a new health monitoring device in your home.
Exactly.
In the future, you will actually have the device, and then you have different capsules for different diseases, such as flu. Yeah? So you test your kids for flu, you don't have to go to the hospital or clinic, and certain STDs like HIV. So it becomes like an espresso machine, but for health, you have the device, you want a capsule for COVID, capsule for influenza, capsule for HIV.
That is very, very impressive. So I'm surprised with just how small and portable this Circle Health Pod is, and what you mentioned about longer term, this being that go-to device for anything beyond just COVID testing. That's very, very exciting to hear.
Yeah, and certainly, and the key thing is that we also want any new types of technology or innovation to be made accessible to all, right?
Yeah.
So certainly that's why even the price point, the device we price it at a way where for a family of household of 4 is 990 HKD. Because one household, you can make sure that you have it, right? The next time you get a fever, cough, or sore throat, you want to actually test to see if you have COVID or not.
Right.
So you don't infect your family or colleagues.
Yeah.
And then for the single-use capsules, it's basically 150 HKD.
Got it. No, this is clearly very innovative, and I'd love to segue into a topic around innovation, in healthcare and biotech. Of course, Prenetics is leading edge. You mentioned the acquisition of or partnership with the Oxford University and their technology over there is a big bet. I guess now with the constantly changing environment, so much happening. Of course, COVID accelerating the rate of dynamism and change, and so much innovation is continued to be needed in the marketplace. How do you and Prenetics and your companies approach this idea and discipline of continuing to be innovative?
Yeah, so ultimately our thesis is that we want to decentralize healthcare, right? So we want to bring healthcare closer to the patient because at the end of the day, it's about easy. Like how easy is it to perform the test, right? Because if it's easy, then there's a lot of benefits. Yeah, it also lessens the burden on the healthcare system, correct? So example of this, right? It's like you'll be able to do it and get results in 20, 30 minutes. If you went to a community test center, it takes 12 to 24 hours to get the results, right? So certainly, again, this is another innovation that we actually have. So this is actually a blood collection device, which is painless. And again, you can do this in the comfort of your own home. So actually, there's 30 microneedles in here. That actually sucks the blood out in 2 minutes, and then basically goes into here. But then you don't feel a single thing. So we put this on your arm. You stick it here 2 minutes, and then it just sucks the blood out. And then when you get your blood, then you mail it to our laboratory, and you get your results and your digital.
Wow.
Right? Correct. So there's a lot of innovation that we're constantly working on. So we're launching this in Q1.
Okay.
So certainly a lot of people are afraid of blood.
Yeah.
And thinking about elderly people, a lot of times it may be difficult for them to actually go to a hospital, go to a clinic. Right? So with this, then you'll be able to get tested for cholesterol, lipids, A1C, food sensitivity, ovarian egg reserve. So certainly in the comfort of your own home.
Wow.
So there's a lot of this innovation happening. And for example, another test that we're launching in Q1 is ColoClear. So it's a non-invasive stool DNA test for the early detection of colon cancer and advanced adenomas. So the alternative to that is colonoscopy.
Right.
I mean, no one wants to do a colonoscopy, right? But if I told you, hey, Joey, you can actually detect colon cancer with a stool sample, mail back to our laboratory in a few days, you'll be able to understand if you have colon cancer. Then it becomes why not?
Yeah.
Right.
This is incredible. Yeah. Thank you for giving us this sneak peek of this blood sampling test, and then the idea of not having to do a colonoscopy is definitely slightly more appealing than having to do so.
Correct.
So no, this is great that all this innovation is constantly happening within Prenetics and the team. I guess I did want to zoom out a little bit. One of the things that COVID has brought to light, in Hong Kong globally, is kind of both the challenges as well as the opportunities that could happen between the private and public sector. That interplay. So I guess I wanted to get your point of view, get your expertise. From your vantage point, what do you think has been working well? What could be improved? What should be the operating model going forward? At the intersection between private and public sector in healthcare.
I think certainly one of the good things that have come out of this pandemic is, right, certainly I think we've seen a lot of public, governments, right, work with the private sector, right? This hasn't happened before in terms of this type of scale, right? Because I think a lot of, because there's no way, for example, during this pandemic that basically the public sector could handle all the testing volumes. Correct? So certainly I think for a lot of governments around the world, they needed to actually collaborate with the private sector. And then certainly this type of collaboration can certainly accelerate to other new things that in later wise, right? So certainly I think this is one of the benefits. And certainly I think that will always be needed. And the more of this type of collaborations, I think is ultimately is better for the community.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing your viewpoint on that. I think I'm very much in agreement and alignment with you. I do want to, talk a little bit about Circle DNA. We need to give Circle DNA some love as well. My understanding is Circle DNA is a genetics testing company, and it helps to assess, other health aspects. So, I can see if I have an inclination towards, certain foods, or if I should be dieting in a certain way, or, if I'm more inclined to, develop some health issues, etc. I would love to hear more about, the company Circle DNA itself, how it works, and the benefits for the consumers.
Sure. So certainly, yeah. So with Circle DNA, so we launched this product in late 2019, and so certainly when we launch any type of product, we certainly want to make sure that it has a very unique selling proposition, right? It's a very strong from a scientific and product perspective. So we utilize a newer technology called whole exome sequencing, right? So that means we're able to sequence all of your 20,000 protein coding genes. Then that gives us the ability to actually have 50 to 100x more data than the competitors. That resulting in basically, if you get the Circle DNA Premium, you actually get 500 plus reports with a single saliva cheek swab. Right? So in terms of what you'll be able to find out is, as you mentioned, you'll be able to understand your genetic risk for cancer, risks for disease, Alzheimer's, even very serious things, right? Even for example, you can understand if you're looking to start a family, if you have genetic mutation, you and your partner may pass on to your unborn child. Right? And if that were true, then basically your unborn child will have a 1 in 4 chance of getting cystic fibrosis or deafness. But the great thing is that it's very actionable, because then you can elect to do IVF and select the embryo that does not have that condition. Right? And certainly even help you understand what's the best drug for you based on your genetics.
Right.
And lifestyle-wise, diet, nutrition, sports profile, and certainly your ancestry composition.
Got it. Yeah, I think for me, genetic testing is such an incredible, greenfield of, future opportunities. The space will, just continue to grow.
Yeah.
And, of course, there are, some misconceptions with genetic testing, but at the same time, there are clear benefits for users. I guess I'd love to hear, your thoughts about, the genetic testing space, going forward. Where do you think, the opportunities are? What more can be done to, promote, healthcare?
Yeah, so certainly I think with the pandemic, I think there's a lot more interest in terms of health and immunity, right?
Yeah.
So certainly with genetics, I think the power is about prevention.
Yeah.
Right? Because the earlier you know, then the earlier you can prevent.
Yeah.
Right, so I'm giving you even my own specific case.
Yeah.
I actually have an increased risk for colon cancer due to my genetics. Now my family does not have colon cancer. Right, I don't have a history of colon cancer in my family, but because I found out 3 years ago, I cut out red meat from my diet because that's one of the biggest risk factors for colon cancer.
Right.
So I did that, when I was like 30, 38, 39, right? So, but we know colon cancer takes about 10 to 15 years to form. So I have that data, I have that knowledge. Right, so of course, if I know I have an increased risk over the average individual, then of course I can do something about it. So certainly, I think this is where the benefits are. But certainly, of course, you can give that data to someone else that can not do anything with it, right?
Right.
So I think certainly for the individuals that are proactive, they really want to maximize or optimize their health and their genetics, then certainly this is a very powerful tool.
Yeah.
But certainly, I always say genetics and environmental work hand in hand together.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're dealt not such a good genetic head, then you can do something from the environment, right? And then vice versa as well.
Yeah. Okay. So this is all fascinating, and I do want to ask 2 more questions, but these are more forward-looking. And the first one is a little bit more macro, just talking about healthcare, biotech, in general. What do you think, or what do you recommend are some of the things we should be on the lookout for? What are some things that might be very, very small in nature now, but with explosive growth? What are some of the trends that we should be monitoring in the next several years? Well,
certainly, I mean, as mentioned with the health plan, I think rapid diagnostics is critical, right? Rapid diagnostics, self-at-home testing. So because a lot of times, again, Hong Kong, we live in a very convenient place. There's a lot of doctors around. You can get anywhere 15, 20 minutes, right? But if you think about the global-wise, there's a lot of places around the world, let's say Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, that you actually don't get access to care, right? So we believe rapid diagnostics, self-testing, point-of-care testing is going to be a major trend over the next 3 to 5 years, right? And again, how do we bring that healthcare closer to that patient?
Got it. Yeah. And then last question from myself, which also ties a little bit to the big announcement that was just made. What is on the horizon for Prenetics and your companies in general?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm incredibly humbled by this opportunity in terms of being able to take a company public.
Yeah.
And certainly working very closely with Adrian and his whole ecosystem. So certainly this is, again, for our entire organization. In terms of what's next, I think this is actually the exciting part is that, we are just getting started, right?
Yeah.
Especially with new capital, that means we can grow further, right? So certainly make new investments in R&D, make new impacts, make new acquisitions on a global aspect, because I think where we are today is that, while we may be the first unicorn in Hong Kong, I think in the next 5 years, I think we have much greater much greater ambitions in mind. I think we can be for Asia's first $10 billion USD company. And the reason why I put the financial number is that, then that creates, if we're able to do that, that means we're making a huge impact on people's lives and people's health.
Yeah. That's fantastic. And Danny, you and Prenetics are just getting started.
Yeah.
This is fantastic news to hear for the Hong Kong ecosystem and also for healthcare globally. I want to thank you again for joining us during this Fireside chat, and thank you for always collaborating with the South China Morning Post.
Great. Thank you so much,
And
Joey.
To the viewers, thank you very much.
That's all we have for today's segment. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and of course to all of our speakers for contributing to today's event. To our audience, please note that the next segment in our series will be taking place on October 28th, where we will discuss investment opportunities in healthcare for 2021 and beyond. For more information on this, visit our series website at healthcare.scmp.com. I'd also like to make our viewers aware of the upcoming Asia Summit on Global Health. Taking place on November 24th, this is Asia's premier thought leadership event on health innovation and investment, as well as a one-stop cross-disciplinary platform to foster international collaboration on global health issues. To register, you can scan the QR code you see on your screen for a special USD $50 discount with the promo code 01P390SCMP. Finally, we'd like to thank our strategic partners, HKTDC and the Asia Summit on Global Health, as well as our supporting organization, One Health Tech. Thank you all for watching. We hope you enjoyed the webinar, and we look forward to welcoming you back next time.